Can you explain to the people what SNY and all that
Okay,
means? Because I don't.
absolutely. So SNY, okay, everybody's heard the term PC, protective custody.
Welcome to this episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Todd Barton.
Hey, good
What's
morning.
up, Todd?
Good morning, Staxx. How you doing, man?
Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate this, man. Thank you. I'm excited for this.
Yeah, you have a wild story, and it's from the other aspect of things. I usually talk to people who were in prison. You were in prison, but in a different way.
Yeah, man. I hit my jacket in '96 was when I started, so I guess I would have had about a J number in California. So
So how many years did you serve?
27 years.
Wow, that's like a bid in itself.
It was, especially a lot of time in the hole, a lot of time working ad seg units, and then made it on squad, a lot of yard time. So yeah, I was in and out all level 4 prisons. Started at CSP Sac, and then transferred up to High Desert in '98.
So what was it like your first experience going? Why did you choose that profession? And what was it like for your first day on the job?
Man, it's kind of a trip. I actually never wanted to be a cop or anything to do with law enforcement. So I was actually going to college to be a physical therapist, and the money that I was putting into school or that it was going to cost me to finish, I was like, man, I'm going to start out life over 150 grand in debt to maybe make 40,000 a year. And I had buddies that were already working in law enforcement, making more than that starting out. And back then when we started, in '96, you weren't even getting paid a lot. I mean, I remember, my pay was like 1,800 a month, and I thought that was big money back then, so
Yeah.
yeah, it was more like it just felt kind of thing. And then, man, when I hit it and I first started, it was something that I genuinely really loved. I mean, truthfully, I've got to meet a lot of great people that became like brothers and sisters and family to me. So grateful for that part of it. And the job itself, actually, it gave me through the years, my family, everything we could have ever needed, and most of our wants. So there's that.
What's it like walking in on your first day? And it's a level 4, right?
Right, right.
Maximum security.
So, man, CSP Sac at that time, New Folsom, like everybody calls it, the old school stuff. Um, it was hardcore, man. It was hardcore. Like the dudes that were in there, these guys looked like they were ready for the Olympia because we still had weight piles back then, yoked out. Most of them take no shit, and it was hard, man. It was scary, man. I mean, anybody that tells you that you walk into that it's not intimidating, they're either full of crap or they're just clueless to what environment they're in. And back then they had weight piles. You'd see these killers, playing softball with bats, horseshoe pits. You're like, man, what are we doing with these guys? So yeah, it was very intimidating. I'm not gonna lie.
So it wasn't what you thought it was going to be when you were training, was it?
Well, here's the thing, man. You go through the academy and they kind of tell you this and that. And back then it was a little bit different than it is now. I mean, you had people that would actually tell you what was up and kind of what to expect, but it's nothing like what you see in the movies. I mean, that was the closest thing I'd ever been to it, was watching TV shows or movies. And man, it's two different worlds in comparison.
So what was your first day uneventful or?
No, actually, we had a stabbing at that time on C Yard. So we're up in the little classroom thing. When you're the first week in the prison, actually, they do what's called an orientation week. And they called us out, and we're dressed in our little Class A uniforms, look like a bunch of little Cub Scouts, And at that time, the Northerners and Southerners were rocking on C Yard, and they had a pretty good melee. And you're out there, and first thing I see is some dude with his throat slashed, all the way from his cheek all the way across his neck, wide open. And just, man, it was, you saw it, you could smell fear. For the first time in my life, I could really, where you smelt, just the craziness of what was going on. So
You could feel the tension in the air in there, right?
dude. And I was so clueless because for me, oh, absolutely. And it's funny because I've always worked out, and dude, I had no idea the lingo or anything. So I'm escorting this one inmate, and in broken English, he's like, "Hey, man, you drive?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, everybody drives." And I'm thinking he's talking about driving a car, and I'm like, "Yeah, man, I drive." Looking, I'm like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And he goes, "No, man, like I can tell you were." Oh, I'm like, "Oh," so that's why I realized driving weights. That's what he was talking about. So it's that kind of naivety that you have to it that even just the verbiage, yeah, I had no clue what I was getting into, let alone, like you said, that tension, that people looking at you and watching. And man, that's when I really realized these guys watch every aspect of who and what you are. And, at Folsom, those guards that were there that I got to be brought up by, they came up from old Folsom. And, they really taught me how communication was key and who you are and how you carry yourself. And don't act like you're hard if you're not. Don't tell somebody you're going to do something if you're not going to do it. Whether it's talking about, "Hey, man, I'm going to throttle you if you come at me like that, or I'm going to hook you up if you need something." Either way, hold your word. Your word is all you've got in there, and your
Yeah.
reputation.
Have you seen other guards drop off? Like when you're on your way in there, have you seen them quit? Like, I'm
Oh,
not doing this.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think out of that group that day we had two people that quit once they just saw that part of it, and then through the years, oh yeah, there's definitely, and truthfully, I can almost give those people more respect that they realized it wasn't for them and stepped out, where they're not putting themselves or somebody else into a dangerous situation by not being where they should be, more so than those people that stay in that. And like I said, the false hardcore guys, that's probably the worst, because you've got different walks of life. So when I started, most of the guards that they had, and I don't even like to call officers, I mean, to me, that's like a pretty boy term, to me, we were guards, man. That's how it should have been. And a lot of those guys came from prior military, prior construction. A lot of us, the way we were out on the streets, I'm going to be honest with you, man, it could have gone either way for me. I didn't always make the best choices. I wasn't a saint by any means, So there was a different mentality and an attitude with that compared to somebody who's like a goody two shoes that wants to be a cop, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So when you're on your way coming up in the guard realm, did
Okay.
you see other guards that had like power trips that wanted to be cops and like took their job a little too serious?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, you kind of said, and there's a fine line with that. Okay. Because even for me, for instance, I didn't take a lot of shit from anybody, So again, then it's like, how that goes. As soon as you stand up for yourself, well, now you got short man's complex, or that guy's got an attitude, or that guy's got this and that. There's a fine line between somebody who didn't tolerate garbage and somebody who was looking for problems. And those guys really got weeded out pretty quickly, or it went really bad for them. There was one case in High Desert. There was a guy that was notorious for just kind of, I hate the term bully, because to me, bully is kind of like one of those childish. I think of that as a playground, kid type thing. But this guy would definitely fit that role. And he was always, and he'd always, of course, those kind of guys pick on those who they think they can pick on. They're not going to go up to, like, this guy would never do that on the level 4 yard. This guy was on the level 3 yard. And especially with the reception guys, that most of them, they had something to lose, so they wouldn't push it so hard. So he could push them where they wouldn't push back. Okay.
Yeah.
So the story with this guy was, at one point, he started messing with an Asian Crip and humiliated him. The guy was bringing fruit out of the chow hall, stripped him out in front of everybody, had him dance around, nude out there. But what he didn't realize was this Asian Crip had a lot of juice, and the Samoan Crips owed him quite a bit of money for dope that was coming in. After he got humiliated, he rallied those guys up, and that group of others actually attacked this guy and his partner inside the building. And, fortunately for him, there was no weapons involved. And, it showed who this guy was, because, man, I've donated more blood at the Red Cross than what this guy gave up. I mean, don't get me wrong, he got thumped up, he got lumped up pretty good. he ends up taking 8 months off of work or a year off of work, for stress and all that other stuff. And then he ended up transferring down the hill to CCC, which was the weaker prison, So
Yeah.
these guys find you out. And like I said in the beginning of this, man, these guys watch who you are. They know who to mess with, who not to. This guy pushed the wrong person too far, and he paid for it. And
Have you
unfortunately, his partner got hit too for it, who was just an innocent kid. And that's what sucks sometimes when you're in that situation, that you end up having to kind of pay the price for somebody else's, the ticket that they bought.
Yeah, some people just absolutely don't mess with the guards. They despise them, and it
Right.
doesn't matter if you're cool or not. I've seen all of it. Like, people, some of them hate the guards.
There are, but at the same time, man, you're there. I did 27 years. There's a lot of times I did 16-hour shifts. You're with these guys day in and day out. You're gonna have to develop some sort of rapport, because they need you to a certain degree and you need them to a certain degree. So it's all in how you carry yourself, man. Yeah, there are guys that definitely have that attitude, but really not that much. Most of these guys, human nature, you crave some sort of, getting along or belonging. And that's on both sides. Because at the end of the day, we're all human, whether I'm wearing green or blue.
Yeah. Have you seen a lot of guards get assaulted?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, High Desert back in the day, man, we were definitely rocking. New Folsom, when I got there, we were doing a lot of cell extractions at that time. And even that, the interesting dynamic with that was, especially in the hole, is that most of the time it wasn't personal. It was what they had to do because they had to get to administration. They can't get to administration, so who do they go for? The guards, And I can't tell you how many times we'd go in and extract, and you'd be brawling. And these are guys that you're dealing with every day. You're feeding them every day. You're taking them to the shower every day, walking them out to yard. You talk to them, you're with them. And now you're going into a cell and battling with them. And man, these guys had heart. Some of these, man, dude, these guys were going after you just like we went after them. But that was a flip side. But we didn't write up back then. You didn't write up shitty reports and try to front them off. And they didn't tell on you either, man. These guys would come out, head injuries, bleeding on their heads, and they go, "Hey, man, what happened?" They go, "No comment." That was a solid motherfucker.
And they put oil down on the floor, baby oil or
Dude,
baby powder. There's all kinds of tricks.
Dude, setting up spider webs was the worst, right? Because you go on a 4-man team, right? And shield, and that shield's big and clunky. And what these guys would do is if you go inside the cells, the way they're set up, that bunk's right across there. So they would literally make it like a spider web going across from the light on top all the way across. So it was like this barrier that you couldn't get into. And that shield man would get stopped up. He's got 3 guys trying to push him in from behind while 2 guys are beating the snot out of him. Me being the smaller, shorter guy, learning that and watching it, what I would do is being the shield man so the guy behind me could see what was going on. There's a lot of times if that would happen, I'd throw my shield down, jump up, get over on the top bunk, get behind, and now I'm brawling 2 dudes by myself while the rest of the guys are trying to break that shit down to get into me. So that was cool. But at the same time, we're walking out and those guys would be like, "Man, that was a good one, B." I'm like, "Yeah, man, you good?" "Yeah, I'm good." Handcuffed behind their back, you're almost shaking their hand, like, and it was almost like, when you're growing up, you have a guy that you fight with, and afterwards, because you both fought and now there's like a mutual respect for each other that you guys did it, there almost becomes like a kindred spirit with it. I'm not going to say these guys become your best friend, but you respect them, that they weren't a punk, they fought, they saw that you weren't a punk, you fought. And man, those were the guys that later on, when they got out of the hole and you catch them on the main line, were the ones you got along with the best.
Yeah, because it's the mutual respect.
100%. And respect, like I said, man, respect is everything. It doesn't matter what you have, how much money you have. I mean, don't get wrong, all that plays into a role. But at the end of the day, man, who you are, how you carry yourself, how you treat others, that's how you hope to be treated back. Nobody can take that away from you. That's one thing no one can take away.
So, a lot of times cops will get like feces and urine thrown in their face and things. Have you seen that happen a lot?
Oh yeah. We've had some good ones with that. And those are usually the ones that back then we called them the J cats that would do that. Because again, a dude who's got any kind of honorable type background or mentality isn't going to go down that route. Usually these were the punks. These were the guys that would do that. And then when we go into cell extractum afterwards, would just be laying down and doing all that kind of stuff. I mean, those guys were, I mean, I don't know how much I can swear on here, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can swear.
I'm good. All right, man. I mean, those were kind of like the chicken shit punks that would do that kind of stuff, because there's no honor and respect for it. And I mean, and that's a shitty thing, especially like, you're wanting to go. I never had it. I'm fortunate nobody ever gassed me, but I've seen it, people spitting on you, that's a big thing. I had, because, like in the cells, this one guy, man, the guard was talking shit to this inmate back and forth. They were trying to get him to go there. Inmate baited him in, and the cell doors there, we didn't have the mesh or the bars. They're actually solid doors, so you've only got like the little split on the window door where it shuts, and he baited him in and said, "Hey man, I can't hear what you're saying, man. You're talking your shit."
Yeah, you go like this,
and again, spit right in his face. And we're kind of all, and we're his partners. Nobody wants to see anybody get spit in the face, but you kind of got to laugh like, man, you got baited into that one, homeboy.
So what, they would throw it right through the little crack, right?
Yeah.
Or if they open the tray, right?
Yeah, the tray thing once in a while. The best one that we had with that I'd ever heard of, the guy didn't get a chance to go through it, but I can't even remember his name now, but he hated the gang investigator. And what his plan was because this guy was validating him, and he was a white boy. And so his plan was that when the IGI cop was going to go there to have him sign some paperwork, that he was going to pull his arm in. He'd already had the noose set up. He wanted his cellie to help wrap it around his hand. And then when they were going to pull his arm in, he wanted to cut this guy's arm off through a tray slot. The only reason we found out was the cellie was like, look, man, I'm not going down with this. And he actually gave up game. But this guy had it in his plan for how he was going to try to cut this dude's arm off.
Wow.
Yeah.
So and another thing is gunners. Have you seen that happen a lot?
As far as what?
People who would off to the cops that were walking by.
Again, man, never really to the males. That would happen to the female staff. And again, that was usually the JCAT. Prison, man, the social mores, you never really. Now, once PCs kind of took over, SNYs, then it became a different deal altogether. But back in those early days, man, it was again those same guys that would throw feces and urine on you. Those are the same guys that would do that to a female that would walk by and, masturbate to them and do that thing. And, fortunately, it didn't happen as much. I mean, I think now with the EOP programs and with the SNY programs, it probably happens way more. But no, we didn't have as much of that as you would think. But again, I worked level 4. These guys were pretty hardcore, and they still, and the reason I say SNYs or JCATs, because most of these guys still have somebody they had to answer to.
Can you explain to the people what SNY and all that means? Because
Absolutely. So SNY, everybody's heard the term PC, protective custody. They've kind of gotten away from that because politically incorrect terminology. You know how their society is now. So it's SNY, meaning sensitive needs yard. So these are your dropouts or the guys that are sex crimes. So obviously, if you've got a guy already in prison for sex crimes, he's not all of a sudden mysteriously cured because he's in prison. He's going to keep up with that same mentality because it's a sickness, let's face it, So those are the guys that would majorly be doing that. And again, because they're SNY, they're not really engaged. Now, later on down the road, you've got more SNY gangs now than you have general population gangs. It's a crazy dynamic how that's changed through the years as well. Because used to be a guy that would be a gang dropout that legitimately was in the gang and was pretty much blood in, blood out, like he got whacked to get out of the gang. They still carried themselves a certain way because they'd made it to someplace. But when you've got a guy who's some weird sex predator, he's PC'd up right out of the cop car. They did it, they put him right in protective custody. He's never been around gangs or stuff like that. He doesn't have anybody to answer to, so he keeps doing whatever sick stuff that he's going to do. And that's a weird thing too, because used to be for a guy to go SNY, it wasn't easy. It was actually very difficult. So for instance, at High Desert, we had A yard was a level 3 yard, B, C, and D, so 4 yards. B, C, and D were all level 4 yards. So if a guy had bad paperwork or done something wrong on B yard and got whacked by the fellas on that yard, they went to the hole, kicked him out, went to C yard, got whacked there for the same thing. When all of a sudden it got caught up with him, then he went to D yard. So it was almost like a 3 strikes and out. Finally, after he got whacked on all 3 yards, would they go, okay, let's put you into protective custody, And even then, a lot of times if a guy wanted to gang drop out, we pressured them. We pressured them for a lot of information on giving up, who's bringing in drugs, who's who, who's that.